So over the last 2 weeks, my kids got pretty sick, and that really slowed things down in the baking studio. Normally, we're pumping out breads for the micro bakery using the spiral, got events, workshops, and all that. And really, it's the middle of summer. There wasn't a lot going on. Both kids were sick, and I kept it pretty normal. But that didn't mean that we still didn't need bread to eat for the family. So I ended up pulling out a recipe that I hadn't made in quite a while, a super basic tin loaf. I'm gonna bake it in the home oven, just chuck a little bit of steam in there. And the recipe was so good. I love the bread so much. The kids love the bread. I sent it out with my newsletter. The feedback was really positive, and I decided to make this video showing you how to make it. It's a great place for beginner sourdough bakers if you're just starting out. So you need a pan, a bowl, and some basic ingredients. We've got bread flour, rye flour, butter, salt, and honey. Now, the breakdown of this for baker's percentage, if you're new to baking, baker's percentage is a ratio of flour to all their ingredients. The total flour is equal to 100% and everything else. So we've got 90% bread flour, 10% rye. We're gonna use 76% water, 7.5% butter, 2.2% salt, 7.5% honey, and about 12 to 15% Levain. Now, I'm not gonna be too fussy over this. I'm trying to keep this loaf of bread simple. The first thing I'm gonna do is put the Levain into the bowl. I'm using some warmer water. This is 32.5 Celsius, which is about 90.5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a little bit warmer than you probably normally are used to, but I'm just trying to keep this simple and let this rise really fast. Plus, it's not a lot of dough in the bowl. So we're gonna add 333 grams of water. Next up, I'm gonna add a little scoop of sourdough, 50 something grams. Well, there's 63 grams. That's nice. I'm totally fine with that. You should see that the starter is floating in the water here. Next up, we're gonna add the flour to this. So this is kind of a fermentolease, water, starter, flour. And then with my hand open like this, I'm just gonna pull and try to absorb all of the dry bits into the flour. Sorry, into the water. And scrape down the bowl. So you can see that there's not really much of a dough here. It's just kind of like a mush there. Oop, I spilled the salt. That's our autolyse. And so I'm just gonna take the temperature for reference. I'm not really too bothered by the temperature. It is 27.5 Celsius, 28 Celsius, which I think is about 82.4 Fahrenheit. And we're gonna cover this and let it rest for about 20 to 30 minutes. This is gonna allow the dough to absorb all the water properly and relax and start to develop some gluten before we mix in the salt, the butter, and the honey. 30 minutes and go. All right, so I've melted my butter here. I've got my salt, so you can kind of see, you can stretch it out pretty good. You can almost window that, not quite, but close. And so what we're gonna do next is put the salt on top, right in the middle. And I'm just gonna dip my hand in the pitcher of water and drip a little bit of water on top of the salt to help it absorb. So we're going a little bit more hydration here, but I'm not gonna be too fussed how the exact numbers in this. I just wanna make a simple loaf of bread for my family. So now I'm gonna use my fingers to pinch through the dough, try to get all those bits of salt absorbed, real simple. And now I'm just gonna sort of turn it in the bowl and press it onto itself. So press the dough into itself, turn the bowl, and sort of using one hand to turn the bowl, this one, and the other one to knead the dough by just kind of pressing it into itself. I'll try to angle that so you can see this better. I'm recording this by myself, so there we go. Now, once you can't feel any salt granules left, we're gonna add the melted butter and I'm gonna add the honey. And I'm just gonna use my hands to get as much of this out as I can out of there. This bread's just for us, so no problem. Okay, and now I'm gonna squeeze the honey and the butter into the dough and keep working the same way until this is fully absorbed. The reason I'm using melted butter is I think it's just way easier to get that fully absorbed into the bread. And it doesn't sort of make it split out like regular butter will. It's more like adding a liquid. So we're just gonna keep going here. Dense that. If you need to, you can use a wet dough scraper to scrape down the sides of your bowl. So you're sort of getting everything in there and then just keep going. We're gonna keep this on the easier side. So we don't need to knead this until it comes together like a strong dough because we're gonna do what's called a fold on this. We're gonna sort of stretch the dough and fold it onto itself. But you can see there's a little bit of butter still on there. It's just got a little bit of a grease look to it. So we're gonna just keep mixing until it doesn't look wet or greasy. Shouldn't take too long. You kind of throw the dough onto itself there. Now at this point, I'd say our dough is primarily mixed. It's pretty slack. It doesn't have a ton of strength. thick, but through a couple of folds later and a rest period, this dough is going to come together and be strong. Before I put the cover back on, for reference, this dough is now at 26 Celsius, which is about 78 Fahrenheit. So it's a good reason for using warm water. You can see it drops significantly from air exposure, my house. It is summer, but still. So we're going to place this on top, and I'm going to set a timer now for 4 hours. 4 hours is going to be my total bulk fermentation, meaning the time from mixing until dividing, or in this case, just shaping because it's only one loaf. And in that 4 hours, we're gonna give this 2 to 3 folds. I'm not trying to fuss over this dough. I'm trying to make something super easy. So I'm just gonna check every now and then with my timer, and we'll come back and fold the dough. So I'm gonna place it here on top, and I'll keep you posted. We'll probably do our first fold at about the first hour mark. Okay, I've just been playing some games with my daughter, trying to keep it kind of chill today. Coming back to our dough, and we're gonna give it its first fold. So it's been about 1 hour. We're giving it a 4-hour bulk fermentation, and you can see the dough is like much stronger now. So we're gonna give this a fold. Gonna use the wet dough scraper to loosen the bread like this, and we're gonna stretch it over. So you can see the dough has been sitting flat in the bowl, and we want to develop some strength. So I'm just going to give it a stretch, and I'm going to rotate the bowl and just pull up and over the corners. So you should see the dough is sort of tightening up a bit. We're going to go about 1.5 times around the bowl until the dough is almost too tight. Well, that's almost 2 times around the bowl. Then we're going to loosen it again, and I'm going to flip this over and just pick it up and sort of let it fall onto itself. So you can see the dough's got some good strength to it now. It's getting smoother, and we're going to place this back in the bowl. We've still got another 3 hours of bulk fermentation, and we'll probably give this 2 more folds. Place the cover back on. 3 hours left, just place this on top of the bowl, and we'll do our next fold at about the 2-hour mark. So we're about halfway through the bulk fermentation. It has been another hour, and it's time to give our simple sourdough loaf a second fold. So I'm gonna loosen the dough in the bowl, and we're gonna give it a stretch and do the same thing again. This time I'm giving it a really good stretch and turning the whole bowl. 2 hands, you can see the dough is tightening up a little bit. And when you're all done, you should be able to pick the dough up, and it really holds its shape in the bowl. You can see that. Good one. I'm gonna let this rest for about another hour and give it a 3rd fold. 4 hours has passed, and it's time to pre-shape and then final shape our simple tin loaf. I've got my tin here, a dough scraper. We're gonna place this on the table, give it a light round, and then shape it into the pan. Really easy pre-shape. Just let the dough out onto the table, and then using your dough scraper, just pull this into a nice rounded ball. Something just like that. We're gonna let this rest for about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna final shape it and place it in the pan. This dough has been resting for about 10 minutes, and it's time to final shape it. We're not gonna fuss too much about this. We're gonna place it into our tin. This tin is not greased, but it is non-stick. So if you're using a tin that isn't non-stick, then of course grease it. So I'm gonna gently flour the top of the loaf, and then I'm gonna flip it over so that the floured side is down. Pull the bottom towards you and up. We're gonna bring the corners over to kind of create what I call a triangle, or almost a triangle. And then we're just gonna roll the dough into itself and tucking it as we go until we get a loaf shape at the end. And then I'm just gonna pick this up and plop it into my tin. This is a low fuss dough. This is definitely not perfect. And we're gonna let this sit in here now. Good morning, bakers. It is coffee time. It's also time to bake our simple sourdough tin loaf. I put this bread in the fridge last night at about 10 p.m. So for a recap, we shaped it at about 7. I left it out for approximately 3 hours. Then it went in the fridge. I've actually cleaned my fridge out because we're getting a new fridge in the micro bakery today. And this will be the last bread actually that ever gets baked out of this fridge. So it's kind of a bittersweet moment. Now you can see here, the bread has risen. What I like to do is use a floured finger, lightly floured, and then we're gonna press into the dough, and you'll see it springs back but leaves a slight indent. We're gonna score this bread. I've preheated my oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. We're gonna put the bread in the oven and drop it to 460 Fahrenheit, and we're gonna bake this for approximately 40 minutes. So you can see the bread is still domed a little bit. We're gonna press into it. It springs back but leaves a slight indent, and this is ready to go. This bread's gonna be awesome. Now, if you had a stencil, you could stencil the top of this loaf if you wanted to. It would look great. We're gonna score this with the razor blade, and we're just gonna put some scores straight across like this, okay? So we're gonna go 1, whoops. Now we're gonna take this and fire it in the oven with some steam. I've got my oven preheated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no special magic here. I do have a baking steel here, but I'm not gonna use it. That's just because it lives in my oven. I've got some boiling water. We're just gonna throw that in there and then, oh, my glasses. And then we're gonna drop the temperature to 460. If you have a setup in your oven for steaming bread, absolutely you can use it, but I'm trying to keep this as basic as possible, so just throw it in there. Our simple sourdough tin loaf is done. It looks amazing. It smells amazing. I cannot wait to make a sandwich out of this. I like to pop it out of the tin right away while it's still warm so that it doesn't sweat on the bottom, and let it cool on the rack. This needs to cool before we slice into it, and I know it's super hard, but it'll be ready for lunchtime today, and I'm just gonna leave this off to the side. When it's cooled down, we'll take a look at the crumb and try it out. Let's slice it open and see what it looks like inside. Oh, if you hadn't noticed, while it was cooling, we got a new fridge in the baking studio. I can't wait to fill this up with all sorts of beautiful sourdough breads and doughs. You can look forward to that in a upcoming video. And let's see what this looks like inside. This is actually my current favorite bread to make. It looks incredible. It's so soft. You can see the crumb is beautiful. Can't wait to see you bake this.